again, Mark here from Talking Bass. Today we're looking at a set of etudes for bass that will help you develop your technique in every way. You'll develop good technique in both hands, your string crossing, string skipping, your finger flexibility, your position shifting, and all other areas of technique. Each exercise is short in length, anything from 1 to 8 bars, and each one should be played in all keys. So each short exercise can be expanded to become a full practice session. These exercises are a part of the Technique Builder course over at the Talking Bass website. The course contains a full module of lessons devoted to all areas of technique. Then the second module provides guided instruction through the set of 60 etudes. I take you step by step through the recommended fingerings and the construction so you can transpose the lines yourself. Today we're looking at 3 separate lines from the course that make use of wide interval movement. These are great for developing your technique in both hands and much more challenging than basic scale or arpeggio-based lines. There's currently a summer sale on at the website, so check out the link in the description if you want to work through 57 other exercises and all the technique lessons in the course with a 30% discount. Okay, let's get into those lines. Etude 46 makes use of a combination of octave and perfect fifth intervals within a major scale. This makes for some wide interval jumps and an interesting line. So we're looking at the C major scale starting at the 8th fret of the E string, starting on the 2nd finger of the fretting hand. So if you work all the way up to the octave and then past the octave with the D, E and F, that's the fingering and the position that we're looking at. So to begin, we're using octaves in the ascent. So we begin with the C octave, so low, high, and then we play the D octave, but starting at the high D there at the 7th fret of the G string and dropping down to the D at the 10th fret of the E string. So immediately that might seem like a less familiar pattern because we're all used to that standard kind of box shape for an octave pattern, but this octave is working across 4 strings. So we've got the D there, 10th fret of the E string, and then the 7th fret of the G string. So might not look like an octave, but that's an octave. So we're working up the C octave, down the D, up the E, down the F, and then we reach the G at the 10th fret of the A string, and we're going to move up a perfect fifth. Now the normal perfect fifth that you would see would be this 10th fret of the A string, 12th fret of the D string. That good old familiar perfect fifth pattern that you'll have seen a million times. But instead, we're starting with the 4th finger there at the 10th fret of the A string, and we're going to play the D at the 7th fret of the G string again with the 1st finger. So there you have a perfect fifth interval over 3 strings. Again, an unfamiliar pattern. So now we begin our descent back down through the scale. So we work up the 5th on the G, down the 5th on the F, up the 5th on the E, and then down the 5th on the D. So, and we're back where we started. In terms of the fretting hand, it's all just the same fingering that you would use for the major scale. So just the appropriate fingers for the frets there in that 1 finger per fret span starting at the 7th fret. So we're starting on the 2nd finger and playing the octave with the 2nd finger and 4th finger, which might be a little different from what you normally play where we use the 1st and 4th fingers, but it's because of the other octaves in there. Now, you can use the 1st finger to the 4th finger. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that it might seem a little bit easier running through the octaves when you're already in position there. Now, if you were in a lower area, if you were down at, let's say, the G, you might not want to play with the 2nd and 4th fingers for the octave. Then you could just use the 1st finger. So a lot of this is based on the register itself. In terms of the picking hand, it's all alternate picking starting on the 2nd finger. So 2nd finger, 1st finger, which might seem a little bit odd playing that octave like that, but then it's a little bit easier on the descent with the 2nd finger down to the 1st finger. Same again for the next octave. So we have to alternate with the unnatural fingering. Same again with the fifths. So starting and finishing on that 2nd finger. Now, these wide interval jumps are likely to result in quite a bit of residual noise from the unused strings when you're making the jumps. So pay specific attention to the anchored thumb there. So as you're moving across, you obviously have to start with the thumb on the pickup and then move across to the E string as you jump on the octave, because then you've got this D up on the G string before moving right back across the 4 strings onto the E string. So you've got to do a fair bit of moving with the thumb there. So just try those first 2 octaves to begin with the thumb jumps. Then when we shift across, not too bad there because we've got the rest stroke to help out. And it's not too bad for the rest of it. You can use the thumb on the E string, but if you start to hear quite a bit of residual noise ringing out, then try shifting across to the A string when you need to. I mean, if you build up speed, you're less likely to get it or less likely to notice it just because of the speed of the movement. But at slower tempos, you're going to hear that noise. So really pay special attention to that thumb. Once you have this line under your fingers, you can start to move it through the different keys. So I'd recommend working through the cycle of fourths. So you could move to F, in which case you could move up to this F at the 13th fret of the E string. And as you move up into these higher registers, you're going to find it quite tricky in the fretting hand, because as you move up, as you come back down across from the G down to this G down at the 15th fret, you're going to have to pivot the hand around quite a bit to make that shift. So this is good practice at moving wide intervals within a very small space. And like I said, once you get down into some of the lower areas on the neck with maybe a key like G flat, you're going to find it a much harder stretch down there. So, you know, I'm still using the second finger, 4th finger for the octave there, but it is a little bit more tricky. Now, I would recommend trying to stick to that fingering because it's good practice at the little micro shifts, because obviously you don't have to keep the fingers held down, you just shift. So it's good practice for some of the less used fingers. So, but if you do need to use the 4th finger or the 1st finger for any of these, like the opening octave there, you could use the 1st finger, and then you could move up. But like I said, try to stick to the original fingering and then shift to a much easier fingering if you need to. Etude 49 makes use of diatonic 7th intervals in outlining a basic progression around a major key. So we're in C major here with a C at the 3rd fret of the A string. So just familiarize yourself with the notes in that area to begin with. So we're following a pattern of ascending and descending 7ths. So we begin on the C, 3rd fret of the A string, and move up a major 7th to the B. Then we jump up to the C and drop down the minor 7th. So it's a 7th on C and a 7th on D, but we're ascending then descending. Then we move down to the A on the E string and jump up a minor 7th. Then we move down to the F on the D string and drop down to the G on the E string to give us a descending minor 7th. Next, we drop down to the F on the E string and ascend a major 7th to the E, then up to the F and drop down a minor 7th to the G, up to the A, ascend a minor 7th to the G, then up to the A and drop a minor 7th down to the B, and we're back where we started. So each of those 7ths in turn. In terms of the fretting hand, we start with the 1st finger on the C, and then you have a choice of either the 2nd finger or 3rd finger for the B, leading up to the 4th finger on the C. So, you know, you could use the 3rd finger, but in this low register, you're probably going to be more comfortable with the 2nd finger. So, Then third finger for the D, which might seem a little bit odd because we're moving down fourth finger down to the third finger, but that sets us up nicely for the second finger on the A there on the E string. Then fourth finger, first finger for the G down to the F, then third finger, first finger for the G down to the F on the E string. So next you can use that second finger to fourth finger again for the E to the F. Then first finger, third finger for the G to the A, setting us up nicely for the fourth finger on the G for the fifth fret of the D string, and then first finger joint bar, A down to the B, G string to the A string. Okay, so there's a lot to think about in terms of the fingering used, but this fingering that I'm using here I think is the easiest for getting through it and the most comfortable. In terms of the picking hand, it's all alternate picked, starting with the first finger. So 1, 2, 1, which means we then have to drop down on the second finger as we come down onto the on the D, and then the first finger takes the E string. So, which means then when we play the G down to the F there on the D string, it's second finger, first finger. And what will happen as you get used to this line is that you'll start to see it in a different way. Instead of seeing all the individual sevenths, you'll probably start to see more scalar movement as you move down from the G to the F, and then the G down to the F down here. So, okay, second finger, first finger, first finger on those two descents. Then second finger, first finger as we rise up on the D string. Second finger, first finger again when we move back down onto the E string. But then we have the second finger in the picking hand when we move up to the G on the D string. So that might be a little bit odd. And then we've got first finger, second finger coming back on the second finger. So again, an unnatural move from the G string back down onto the A string. So fairly tricky. The end of that line is going to be the most tricky part, but the rest of it should fall under your fingers fairly well. Because we're in a major key, we're more suited to working through the cycle of fourths. So if we move up to an F, 8th fret of the A string, you'll notice that you have to change the fingering quite a bit. So when you've played the F up to that E, you're probably going to want to use the first finger to second finger, and then the third finger takes the octave. Then second finger, first finger as we drop down, third finger, first finger. You'll still use the joint bar at the end, but for every single one of these keys as you move through to B flat, E flat, A flat, each one of them is going to present a different hurdle in terms of the fingering. And I can't go through every single fingering that you're ever going to have to use. You want to find the most comfortable one and the one that works for you. For etude number 50, we're looking at diatonic tenths. This line is in the key of G major and takes place on the E and G strings only. So we've got quite a few position shifts to deal with. So to begin with, you want to familiarize yourself with the diatonic tenths within G major. Now, if you don't know anything about tenth intervals, it's just a third, but with the top note taken up an octave. Okay, so instead of this mushy mess, down here we get this nice interval here. So G to B would be a major third. Most of you will know that. So G up to this high B is a tenth. So really we're looking at the diatonic thirds in the major scale. So just in case you don't know the sequence of them, we're going to have major, minor, minor, then major, major, and then minor, minor. So 1, 4, and 5 are major, the rest are minor. So if we were to play the thirds working up through the G major scale, if you think of the notes in G major, first of all, we'd have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and to G. So you want to know the scale on one string to begin with. Then we can add those thirds. So we've got the G to B, that's the major third, then minor third, major third, major third, minor third, and there we are. We're back at the G. So once you've learned the thirds in G major, you can just apply the tenths. So a major tenth interval is going to be the root note there, and then it's going to be the next fret up, but on the G string. So we've got the G to the B. There's a major 10th. For a minor 10th, it's just one fret lower, so G up to the B flat. That would be a minor 10th. Okay, so it's just those two patterns you've got to know. So then you can just work through that same sequence of thirds. So G, major third, then A, minor third, B, minor third, C, major third, D, major third, E, minor third, F sharp, minor third, and up to the G major third. Okay, so as little chords. So now we can work through our etude. So we start on the first degree, the G, with the B, the 10th there, the major 10th. So we play up through those two notes on the E string and G string, and then we shift up to the 10th on the B, the third degree. So we jump up to the 7th fret there, coming down on the G string and E string. Then we drop back down a whole step to the A, the minor 10th. So ascend through that 10th and then up to the 4th degree. So this is going to be the E down to the C. Okay, so we're always ascending and descending. So ascend, descend, ascend, descend. Okay, and then we move up to the D with the major 10th there. And again, we follow the pattern in descent, but we're ascending and descending. Okay, so D up, C down, B up, A down, and back to the G. So you just have to remember where the major 10ths are in there. So remember it's on the C and the D. So, oops. And this exercise is really good for learning those diatonic 10ths. Then we repeat all of that. But when we reach the D, that major 10th, we descend again, but we just play up through each 10th in descent. So, and we're back where we started. So the whole thing. In terms of the fretting hand, I'm using the first and third fingers for everything. So all of those 10ths, I'm playing with the first and third. So first, third, third, first as we descend, first, third, first, third, first, then all the way down. It's just those two fingers. Now, in terms of the picking hand, you have a choice. You could alternate pick everything, starting on either finger, but that might feel a little tricky because you are going to be alternating the finger that you come back onto the E string with, so it can be a little bit confusing. But from an instinctive vantage point, I actually tend to just use the first finger for the E string and the second finger, the middle finger, for picking the G string on this. Don't ask me why, it's just something I've noticed and I feel most comfortable doing it. So give it a try if you find the alternate picking too difficult. So I'm playing first finger, then second finger, then second finger and first finger. It means that I'm always moving up onto, ascending onto the G string with that second finger, which is always easier because it's the longer finger. And I'm always dropping down onto the E string with the first finger. So I think that's the kind of mental gymnastics that I did subliminally. So, oops. Okay, so first finger E string, second finger G string. When it comes to moving through keys, remember it's in a major key, so you can run through the cycle of fourths. So you might start with the C there at the 8th fret of the E string and work up. So again, you're going to have to familiarize yourself with the 10ths within that key. So again, as you move through the keys, this is really good practice for learning what those thirds are within the key.